they try to also to capture and push back, take away your black leadership. In America right now in
Oh yeah.
2019, we have absolutely no black leadership of any substance. We had a few doing history, starting off initially. We had a
Man, they keep knocking them off, man. They keep knocking them off. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Nat Turner. I mean, shoot, Tupac and Biggie. And the only thing they leave us with is some jokers. You know what I'm saying? That's all that's left.
activists. Those ministers came into effect starting about 1819, but their primary purpose was to mislead and contain black folk and to preach black folk about pie in the sky after death and to be good, hard-working slaves
Yeah.
and to not expect anything on this earth, wait until death and get it then.
Yep.
And so those black ministers were leaders, even though they didn't have any education. They didn't understand race matters. But they were still black leaders.
Man, really just spiritual grifters, if you ask me, man. There's a YouTuber that goes by the name of Maj Tour. His YouTube channel is called Black Guns Matter, right? He's spreading the good word, right? His whole thing is responsible gun ownership, responsible gun awareness, safety first, and all that stuff. He's talking about the stuff that matters. You know what I mean? And I know like a lot. I mean, it's like when I talk about gun ownership with my homies and stuff like that. It's always, oh yeah, I got my gun. It's like, I'm ready. I'm strapped. And I'm like, that's cool, right? But what do you know about gun safety? Like, have you done any like gun safety courses? Like, what do you know about a myriad of the topics that surround like responsible gun ownership and stuff like that? And it's like it's crickets. You know what I mean? And that's not good enough. You feel me?
So I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm gonna do something that's only gonna benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country, right?
What's up, YouTube? This is HT, aka Higher Thinking, here to remind you to please stop at Dr. Claud Anderson's YouTube channel and watch his videos, right? Watch it unsnipped and unclipped and show some support, man. Stop at the comment section and just leave some roses because he deserves it, right? He's dedicated his entire life to being a warrior for a disenfranchised group of people, and that his work is not ending with him, that remind him that he's cultivated the next generation of warriors that's willing to continue the fight that he's left off on, right? So please stop by and show him some love. And in the meantime, enjoy this video.
This is a special channel, unlike any other channel. We're not a fake channel. When the Bible says things that you are admonished to do is to first get knowledge, but more importantly, get understanding. When you come to this channel, you get some of both. We give you everything you need to know about race matters, from the history in the old days, 460 years ago, up until the present time, where daily events appear in the newspaper and on television. Come here and get it straight. There's no drinking like alcohol with fake fillers in it. You get it straight without the fillers. And but again, I have to tell you, we say nothing that we hopefully would be race-based. We try to simply tell the truth as we know it. So come here to this channel and get the real scoop on the YouTube channel, Connecting the Dots with Dr. Claud Anderson. Now today, we're going to talk about something I think is very important to you, but there's so much to say about it that I'm going to put it into two parts. Let's start off with part one. When they were drafting the United States Constitution, and they met up in Philadelphia and said, we're going to craft a constitution. And but what we're going to do is create a new democracy. We're going to attract people from around the world to come here for new opportunities and new freedoms and new rights. But to do that, we got a problem. How we're going to do that at the same time our purpose is in building this country is to use black people and their labor to do it. If we craft a constitution that says we are the cradle of democracy, wouldn't we be hypocritical if we say we're going to build a nation with freedom and opportunities for everyone, at the same time we're preparing ourselves to enslave millions of black folk? And so what they did in the Philadelphia meeting, they closed the doors, pulled the shades, put guards on the doors, and said we got to come up with a scheme on how we're going to best do this. And finally, after a week of talking, discussing, debating the issue about how to craft a constitution, the first constitution of the United States, at the same time, use it as a basis for enriching immigrants coming to America. How are they going to do that? They said, here's what we'll do. In the Constitution, we use two kinds of language. We'll have some terms, broad terms we use that specify and particular to whites. We use other terms that will be specifically designed to identify blacks or the black slaves. The rule in politics is anything that's for everybody, it's not for anybody. So whenever you hear anybody in politics and economics in our race-based society using very broad, ambiguous terms like minorities, poor folk, people of color, multicultural, diversity, they are using terms to make sure that nothing happens specifically and solely for black folk.
Yes.
They use those terms to keep
Yes.
black folk down and
Yes.
keep them out.
Yes.
So anytime any politician in economic programs or policies or in political policies use those very broad, ambiguous terms without being specific about correcting the dilemmas of black folk in America, you're being sandbagged.
You got that right.
And you tell them, no, we're not going for that. Anything that's coming down the road for black folk must be very specific. Do not let them use the old game that they used in the Philadelphia Convention by using these very broad, ambiguous terms. What's the second thing they use to maintain the status quo in black? Second term, they use this whole myth about a colorblind society. There is no such thing as a colorblind society.
No way.
That term was never used until about 1896 in the Plessy v. Ferguson decision with the United States Supreme Court. And they used it, that was the first time that word people of color was used, or being colorblind. And so they tried to use that to try to justify, again.
Yeah, this is like, I believe it was like a ploy to disguise their racism as more or less trying to pass it off as business, right? We're not doing this to you because you're black, right? We're doing this because business, right? Like it's just that blacks at that time, even now, obviously, blacks just didn't have the means, right, to compete, right, with white folk, you know what I mean, or other privileged groups of people during that time, right? So like it didn't from a business sense, it didn't make sense to give blacks preferential treatment, especially honest loans, you know.
Not doing anything specifically for black folk. But one of the members of the Supreme Court, Justice Harum, says that this nation should be a colorblind society. And but that was just a hypothetical situation he was proposing. Everybody knew that this country is always very color specific. Always color specific. They knew exactly who they were enslaving. They knew what color they were when they enslaved them. They knew they were blacks, but somehow they convinced black folk to say, be colorblind, pretend that you can't see color. And that way you'll never solve the problems because they knew what color they used to enslave you. They got to know what color to use and pick and choose when coming out. But black folk go for it. So consequently, that is a device that's regularly used in all levels of media to keep black folk in the status quo position of being an underclass. Another third thing they use is they try to also capture and push back, take away your black leadership. In America right now in 2019, we have absolutely no black leadership of any substance. We had a few during history, starting off initially. We had
they keep knocking them off, man. They keep knocking them off. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Nat Turner. I mean, shoot, Tupac and Biggie. And the only thing they leave us with is some jokers, you know what I'm saying? That's all that's left.
Activists way back in the early 1800s and a few in the 1700s, but they were just activists. There wasn't that many of them. In the 1800s, we got a few visible blacks, supposed to be black leaders, about 1818, 1890s, when the evangelical movement went through this country in religion. Whites said, well, we have a few blacks ministers. We'll choose them, let them be black leaders, and let them go to church. But also, when they go to church and those black ministers start talking or preaching, we got to make sure a white person is present, make sure he doesn't do anything that's misleading to those black folk, but they trying to direct them out of slavery or being free. And so those ministers came into effect starting about 1818, 1819, but their primary purpose was to mislead and contain black folk and to preach black folk about pie in the sky after death, and to be good, hard-working slaves,
Yeah.
and to not expect anything on this earth, wait until death and get it then.
Yep.
And so those black ministers were leaders, even though they didn't have any education, they didn't understand race matters. But they were still black leaders up from
Really just spiritual grifters, if you ask me, man.
about 1818 up to about after the Civil War. Now, after the Civil War, when blacks got the right to vote, then and they could vote a few black officials in. They voted in about 16 blacks in the Congress, in the Congress. And secondly, any blacks that got appointed in positions like sheriffs or working for the post office, they became black leaders in the community.
Yeah.
And so we had a new kind of black leadership then. This kind of
people.
Public leadership on the public payrolls and public eyes, they sort of minimized the role of the black ministers and became leaders.
Yeah, that's how it should be, man. Yeah, that is how it should be, I would say. The people like the grassroots. That's what it's like. That's like the grassroots movement. And I don't know, man. I'm not gonna just jump the gun and say there is no grass. Come on now. That's ridiculous. But I do want to say that we gotta the grassroots movements need to do their best, right, at becoming as nuanced and balanced minded as possible, and so that we ultimately can get the best solutions possible for our communities, right? So, but it's definitely in our best interest to keep the leaders on the grassroots basis, because anybody hired seems to be have other things in mind and other ways of getting by, besides focusing strongly on our communities and our people.
Any black that they could not control, they would wipe them out physically through assassinations or eliminations. And last, but they had another trick where they said, let's just simply control them.
Yeah.
What we do, we capture any black that has the potential.
Meritorious man's mission. But yeah, it's essentially the concept of taking our leaders and using them against us. Using people that look like us, right? And then essentially using them and basically using our own people to be counterproductive towards our actual goals. I would say they will come along and give advice or align or misalign the prize. You know what I'm saying? They will come along and say, "Well, no, y'all black. We don't need preferential treatment in America. We got this. Let's just focus on equality amongst all people, and then we'll get swept along with the thing, and everything will be all fine and dandy for us Black Americans." Like, meritorious man's mission, right? I call those people agents. That's what I do. I call them agents. I call them people that essentially come along and tell us to vote or die. You know what I mean? And cite us about all of this stuff, and about all this stuff that ultimately doesn't mean anything. They even romanticize the idea of abortion. You know what I mean? And like these things have very, very real ramifications. Everything that looks good to us initially has a downside to it also, and they won't tell you about the downside. They only tell you about what's the good sides of these things. I would argue to say anybody that offers you advice that don't tell you the pros and the cons of all possible options, they're not here for you to for your betterment. Look out for those. Look out for those folks that are a product of meritorious man's mission. I have to say this word as many times as I possibly can. Hold on.
Being a leader, what we do, we co-opt them and offer them meritorious man's mission.
Meritorious man's mission. But yeah, they become agents. Don't be a product of the advancement of an agent. Thank you.
Put them in a major white corporation in a high-level position, or appoint them to Congress with the understanding, as they did in the 1870s, which says if you come to a public office, 3 things you cannot talk about if you're a Black elected official or you're holding a public office. You cannot come to this office talking about anything pertaining strictly and solely to Black people. Point 1.
Whoa! You can't talk about anything. I do remember Kamala Harris saying that, we can't do anything specifically for a targeted group of people. I do remember that, even though you can do something that targets a group of people, you can do a lot of things that directly is to the detriment of a specific group of people. But you can't do anything that essentially make amends or restore that group of people that was essentially being wronged throughout generations and generations of being negatively affected by these programs, by these systems. Ain't that something? But yeah, very interesting.
You cannot talk about group issues and focus on blacks.
Can't talk about group issues.
And thirdly, you cannot talk about ways and
hold on. You can't talk about group issues. Because they're trying to pass this facade of being like a colorless society where they don't see race or whatever like that. Really? Are we gonna? They're really playing. They really try to play that game, huh? All right.
You cannot talk about ways and holding white folk accountable for 360 years of slavery.
Wow. Okay, so that explains the Republican side of things. That explains the CRT stuff, because it's essentially holding white folks accountable for everything they've done to us over these many years. These many generations, rather.
In the 1870s, or nowadays in 2019, are holding them accountable for reparations.
Yeah.
So those are the three techniques they use and devices they use to eliminate black leadership and make them disappear. So after the 1960s civil rights movement, black folk got co-opted. The entire cadre of black leadership got co-opted, and they were taught to give up, encouraged to give up, saying give in to the.
If you allow people to be general with their words, that essentially gives them leeway to essentially conflate your issues with adjacent black people's issues, right? Since we're talking about black people, this being Dr. Claud Anderson, they use these really weird words, these broad ambiguous terms, to essentially misalign direct involvement with their mistreatment of black people. It kind of lends to this facade of being a society or a group or a nation that doesn't see color, right? All this is just one big kumbaya hand holding plan. We'll call it a plan. Keep white people from being held accountable. That's what all this is. That's what all is about. Plan from the very beginning and upheld through generations upon generations. Claud Anderson figured it out. I figured it out also. And I want everybody else to figure it out.
The facts and realities of white racism and join us on a new concept called benign neglect or political correctness, which means take the focus off that you would have been put on black folk, put it on other groups.
So benign neglect and political correctness is somewhat synonym, an attitude or policy of ignoring an often delicate or undesirable situation that one is held to be responsible for dealing with. Man, first thing I'm thinking of is reparations.
Broad terms again: women, gays, transsexuals, anything but black folk. And so consequently, black leadership disappeared. Another technique they use quite frequently is to try to corrupt the Second Amendment and use that against black folk, which
Second Amendment
that gun control.
Yeah.
So the Second Amendment went into effect because they were controlling blacks with physically by whites having laws in effect that says basically that only whites can carry weapons and tools or any kind of fighting or defensive tactic or instrument. And so starting in about 1643, they passed laws saying that black folk are going to be slaves. You cannot have weapons. You cannot have any tools. You cannot have signaling murals. And then again, it was ratified again in about 1672, where it said every colony was passed laws saying that, called the Second Amendment, that would say that every white person, a white male between the ages of 18 and 42, must carry arms at all times. For what reason? To maintain slavery, to keep blacks under control.
Yeah.
That was called the Second Amendment of the Constitution. It was designed strictly and solely to maintain slavery and arm all whites, but yet at the same time say that no black can carry an arm or have a weapon at any time to resist being enslaved.
Crazy.
That's in the Second Amendment of the Constitution. It's still popular even today. Now that everybody debates this question about gun control, and at the same time they're talking about gun control, you got to understand, out of about 367 million rifles and handguns in America, most 99.5% are owned by whites.
Yeah.
Whites own 99.5% of all the weapons. They produce all the weapons. They have all the bullets. They also have all the rifles, gun stores, and rifle and guns, weapons sales in the country. They own all the shooting ranges, and with the few guns, handguns that black folk have, most of these cities are urged to do what? Tell black folk in those cities, go out and turn in your weapons and get a bag of groceries.
This is my take on this whole stop the violence program and stuff like that. It's like when a system has been crafted to essentially disparage and target a specific group of people throughout generations upon generations upon generations, and whatever wealth they've accrued for themselves, whatever progress they've made, is essentially been torn down and ravaged by angry mobs and evil, you know what I'm saying, racist people, right? What that creates is this group is more or less left to rummage the bottom of the barrel of like what's left over in wealth in America, to even make it alive, right? To make a living, to stay above water, if you will. So with this type of reality set in place, you know what I mean, it's gonna create a lot of socioeconomic problems. So if there's just no money, if there's no funding in these communities, the people within these communities are left with more or less nothing. They're more or less left with almost nothing. You're right. In the event that these people grab hold of weapons, you know what I mean, the fast and easy way of handling their immediate problems and their immediate threats, yes, it's gonna cause for a mass amount of violence all over the community. It's gonna be a big concern within these groups. What people on the left don't understand is the leftists and the socialist groups and the anarchist groups and all those other guys, they're anti-gun. You know what I mean? And what they don't understand is what they understand so well. They understand this, like the systemic issues so well, but they don't understand. For some reason they just missed the point of how it affected gun ownership for blacks. Gun ownership for blacks is important, but okay, let me reword that. Responsible gun ownership with blacks is important. That's what blacks need in America. That's the part. That's one of those conservative talking points that blacks need to adopt to be safe in America. It just is what it is. Like we can't expect to live in a society where everybody is always going to be nice and kind, and if in the event that there is an altercation, nobody's going to pull out a firearm, right? So it's in blacks people's best interest to have a firearm in the event that something were to pop off, right? So with that said, when a system essentially makes it so that blacks are socially at the very bottom, right? The culture is literally so far gone today where we will essentially shoot at each other, right? In order to make a living, just to be able to eat, right? Obviously, there's going to be some people that's going to come together within the community and find alternatives to eat, right? Because like I said, the whole purpose for a lot of these young people is just to eat. So if you're going to create a program where you will turn in a gun and you exchange your gun for groceries and stuff like that, then that essentially is you're disarming the community. You know what I mean? And I am an advocate for gun ownership. It just is what it is. You know what I mean? But again, it has to be safe and responsible gun ownership. Anyway, with that said, if we allow these people to essentially come in and find ways to disarm us, then that's essentially we're essentially going to be left with our pants down. You know what I mean? While more well-off communities people is like 10 times, 100 times more armed than we are. And essentially what that means is they're 100 times, maybe even 1,000 times more prepared and safe than we are. You feel me? So no firearm, man. That's kind of left with your pants down. That's just the reality of it. And if they've literally, the dominant societies, the government, right, or these oppressors have literally found a way to essentially disarm. They found a way for us to disarm ourselves. And that's just how deep, that's just how outrageous this whole system has spiraled out. You know what I mean? There's a YouTuber that goes by the name of the Mosh Tour. His YouTube channel is called Black Guns Matter, right? He's spreading the good word, right? His whole thing is responsible gun ownership, responsible gun awareness, safety first, and all that stuff. He's talking about the stuff that matters. You know what I mean? And I know like a lot. It's like when I talk about gun ownership with my homies and stuff like that. It's always, oh yeah, I got my gun. It's like, I'm ready. I'm strapped. And I'm like, that's cool, right? But what do you know about gun safety? Like, have you done any like gun safety courses? Like, what do you know about a myriad of the topics that surround like responsible gun ownership and stuff like that? And it's like it's crickets. You know what I mean? And that's not good enough. You feel me? So again, he's talking about like disarming black folk. You know what I mean? And to be honest, and the wild part about it is we're finding ways to disarm ourselves. And the socialists, the leftist side of our communities, they need to kind of get on task. They need to get on code with like this Black Guns Matter situation.
Y'all, is it urge you to turn in your guns, and we'll give you a bag of groceries. That goes on quite frequently.
See, told you, a bag of groceries for your weapon. Called it.
Areas across America. Another tech they use is always fabricate minorities, and then so that when any program comes out that could possibly benefit blacks, whether it could have been the New Deal of the 1930s or the Great Society program in the 1960s or any program that comes out. First thing I do is say that the program can't be specifically for black folk.
Yeah,
it got to be for everybody.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about Kamala Harris. You know what I mean? Black folks came to her, hey, we want, what do y'all think about reparations? Like, is this something that's like a possibility? And she's like, nah, can't do anything specifically for any ethnicity of people. I beg to differ.
Do you support reparations for black people?
Well, listen, again, we had over 200 years of slavery. Segregation and discrimination that is not legal but still exists and is a barrier to progress. And we have to recognize that everybody did not start out on an equal footing in this country. And in particular, black people have not. And so we have got to recognize that and do something about that and give folks a lift up. That's why, for example, I'm proposing the LIFT Act. Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole in the country. Right?
You said, what's everybody? Well, what we're going to do now is that rather than it used to be just...
In case anybody that watches this doesn't agree with me, look no further than Native Americans. Look no further than the Orientals or East Asians, right?
Black, whites. Let's magnify that. So that anybody who's been discriminated against is eligible to receive any benefits that black folk could have received. And so what they do, they fabricate all these minorities. So now everybody can be equal to black folk, not based on racism, but based on another thing they use called discrimination, and somehow make discrimination equal to racism, which there's no way it could be. Discrimination is a natural human process. Anybody can discriminate. Everybody must discriminate to be able to exist and interact with their environment and with the general society. You discriminate on what kind of ice cream you're going to buy, what kind of clothes you're going to buy, what kind of car you want to buy. Everybody discriminates. And yet I see on a regular basis some kind of admonishment in the media saying we got to eradicate all forms of discrimination. That is totally, absolutely insane and impossible. You cannot eradicate discrimination because every human being must be capable of discriminating to make decisions. But they use that technique, and that way black folk get confused because they don't understand what's going on when you equate racism with discrimination.
Yeah. Like I see I know what he's talking about. But more or less, they're much like what they did with the term woke, right? What the right did with the term woke. You see, the term woke started off as a black thing. Yeah, if a black person called you woke, that more or less meant that you are aware of like the systems and the powers that essentially work against marginalized groups of people, right? Now, what Republicans have done with the term woke, or the right, what you want to call them, they turned the term woke into essentially what they don't like, right? They turn anybody who says things that they don't like, that the right does not like, is now woke. And that's essentially what the government and our oppressors, right, have done to the word racism. According to Dr. Claud Anderson, right? They took the word racism and they conflated it with discrimination. Racism is actually something that that when studied properly, right, it will more or less kind of teach us the things that critical race theory teaches us, right? It essentially criminalizes white folks in America. You know what I mean? What Donald Trump said, it makes people hate America, or whatever you want to call it. No, this is it's reality. You know what I mean? It's not. Who cares if it makes people hate America? This is stuff that we need to talk about in order to progress properly in America. You know what I mean? And they'd be surprised at what will happen if we actually start taking the voices of the disenfranchised to heart, and to actually give people the proper ear to air out our grievances, right? Anyway, as I was saying, they took the word racism and they perversed it. In other words, right? They turned it into something that was completely disaligned with the reality, or what its intended use was supposed to be.
Those two things have nothing in the world to do with each other. But black folk have yet to understand fully what racism is. And in our future conversation, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to go back and give you the history of racism and show you the difference between discrimination and racism.
Yeah.
What people are telling you nowadays is that there's no difference, that discrimination is the same as racism, that bias is the same as racism, that being opposition or not liking somebody is racism. Those things have nothing in the world to do with racism. We're going to talk about it in part 2 on our program. I'm going to have to stop at this point, and this is part 1.
All right.
A whole bunch of other devices to talk about with you, and we come back next week. Come back and join me on this YouTube, and let's finish up. I probably only got through about 3 or 4 today. I'm going to probably bring up about 19 or 20 things that they're using to make sure that nothing changes for black folk in America.
Okay.
That's why in this country you're in exactly the same position you were in 1861. You are now a permanent underclass. And where you used to be second-class citizens, that a massive, unending influx of immigrants in this country has pushed you from being a second-class citizens down to third-class citizens. And in about another 4 or 5 years, Arabs and Middle Eastern are going to get together with Asians, and they're going to push you from being third-class citizens down to fourth-class citizens. That way you're going to
down the pecking order,
still be in the same construct at the bottom. All these devices we use to keep you where you are, which is totally dependent on other people, especially the dominant white society, for your daily needs, your daily food and substance.